Hello and welcome to Real Watchers Movie Club. My name is Garrett.
And my name is Kevin.
And we are your hosts. Movie Club is the show where we pick a movie every week and discuss it just like a book club. On today's show, we are covering the iconic drama Do the Right Thing. Our thoughts and more coming up on Movie Club. Released in 1989, Do the Right Thing was directed by Spike Lee and stars Spike Lee, Danny Aiello, and John Turturro. On the hottest day of the year on a street in Brooklyn, everyone's hate and bigotry smolders and builds until it explodes into violence. It has a 4.4 out of 5 on Letterboxd and is ranked number 59 on its top 250. The film was nominated for 2 Academy Awards, one for Best Supporting Actor for Danny Aiello and for Best Original Screenplay. Before we dive into our thoughts on the film, we do want to issue a spoiler warning for the film. We will be discussing everything that happens in this movie. If you've never seen it before, it has things that I didn't know were going to happen, so make sure that you watch this movie blind and then come and listen to this. But stay tuned to find out what show or movie, we're going to be covering at the end of the show, because it's going to be an interesting one for sure. But it is also worth it to note that this movie deals with some pretty weighty topics, and by no means are Kevin or I experts in that area. We definitely try to be better about it, as all of us should be, but we are not experts, so please forgive any misinformation or anything that may come out of this episode. Alrighty, Kevin, so Do the Right Thing. This is a movie that I have heard endlessly about, which is why I picked it. Probably one of the most talked about movies when it comes to like Letterboxd top 4s for actors and creatives. Also, just one of those movies that when you hear about landmark movies and things that are considered to be very important, this movie always comes up in the conversation. So
exactly.
Definitely wanted to give it a shot. I do own the movie. I bought the movie before I'd even seen it because it is such a landmark film. I was like, I should have it. You know, it's gonna be it'll be. I doubt that I'm not gonna like it. You know, I know that I'm gonna like it. I just didn't know how much I was going to like it and appreciate it. But I know obviously you've been kind of nodding your head this whole time. You've definitely heard of this movie before, but did you know anything about it before watching it?
No, I knew nothing about it. I have heard of this movie, and I've had heard or have seen like the poster of this movie a lot too. And I'm glad I didn't know anything about it though.
Gotcha. Well, glad to hear it. But let's go ahead and dive a little bit into some spoiler-free thoughts before we really dive into the film. On first watching, first off, I think this is going to warrant many more reviewings because this movie, it feels like one of those movies that you're going to notice new things every single time you watch it, and you're also going to come away with a different meaning every single time. You know, at its core, this is a movie about not one or two different kind of communities or races going at it. This is about just communities in general reaching a boiling point, which is just something that is becoming, unfortunately, a mainstay part of our society now. And so in a lot of ways, that I feel like this film is just as relevant and important now as it was when it came out. Probably even more relevant now.
I can see that.
Because of a certain event that happens in this movie that has happened an unfathomable amount of times since. But I think that the one thing that we can really kind of appreciate about this movie is that it is very grounded. And it takes this approach in 1989 when, you know, we weren't as knowledgeable about these kinds of things happening as we are now. So
exactly.
But kind of spoiler-free thoughts before we dive in. What did you kind of think about it after first viewing?
Like you said, this will be like a multiple watch sequence because of everything that is going on. But first watch, it took me by surprise. And I'm not going to say like, let me say this. I don't know how I feel about it because of what the situations were going on in this movie. And that's why we do this this video is because we get to talk about it, and then maybe I have some questions that you will be able to answer, and if I see something different than you do as well. So I want to just say that right now. I don't know how I feel about this movie, and not because it's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just there's a lot to take in this movie.
Yeah, and it's definitely, I think, and we'll drop a spoiler warning. That I think the way that this movie ends really, I don't want to say it puts you in a funk, right? Like it, it does end on a bit of a down note. There's a little brief moment of positivity towards the end that I definitely really want to talk about, and we'll get there. But it definitely, like life itself,
it's not a happy ending sometimes.
It's not always a happy ending. But let's go ahead and kind of dive into this a little bit more, and because I'm curious to know what you have questions about, and I'm not going to pretend like I have the answers. I'm just going to have interpretations based on what I've seen, and we kind of go from there. But I do want to talk about before we dive into the kind of the narrative weight and meaning and all that, I do want to talk about the technical qualities of this film, where this movie feels like an 80s movie for sure. Because look at all the colors, man.
I loved that style. I was in for it when I was watching it.
It was a lot of reds and yellows and browns and those kinds of colors, and really contributes to an ongoing motif of the movie, which I really like. But it's a different looking film than I think a lot of ones we've watched recently. Definitely a lot more colorful in the choices of clothing and environment and sets that make up the film. And I think that's really something that helps the film stand out. Also, I really love the way that, this is always something that Spike Lee does really well, but is the way he uses the camera. There's parts of this movie that feel like different movies. There's like the POV shots where, it's just watching Mookie, and I'm going to forget his name, Radio Raheem, when they're talking in the middle of the street. And then it goes into that first person view in front of Radio Raheem, and he does the love-hate speech, which is fantastic. One of the best moments, one of my favorite moments of the movie. And it's still relevant to this day.
And the endless sidewalks I loved as well, with him just panning out, or no, he's panning in, but he starts in a zoom out position, so you can see that it's, I don't want to say it's all fake or real, but you feel how big this community is, and we're just focusing on a couple of these people that are in this community. But it looked so beautiful when Mookie's just walking across the street, but it feels like we could do that same shot like just right outside our house. And that's what's really cool about it, is it's very easy to replicate, but it just takes your breath away. Sometimes you're like, wow, that looks really good.
Yeah, and think about it this way too, and I guess diving a little bit into meaning. It is like a maze of streets. It is labyrinthian, right? Like it does feel like a maze or a labyrinth, or in some ways, maybe some sort of theme it goes for is almost like a prison, where it's impossible to kind of break out of that world that you're in. That could be part of something that Spike Lee is going for here, because there's a lot that this movie tries to say. But yeah, like the way the camera works, again, Spike Lee is always incredible with his camera, so that's really no surprise.
Oh, I will let the audience know this is my first Spike Lee movie too. So
there you go. It's my second one. The first one I watched was Defy Bloods, which is nothing like this. It's a very different movie.
Okay.
That one has to do with like Vietnam and black veterans. So it's a good movie, don't get me wrong, but this is like a whole nother level. But I also really appreciate that Spike Lee casts himself in the movie.
Dude, he was great in this movie too.
Yeah.
I felt like I had to double take. I'm like, did Spike Lee create this movie as well as be the star of this movie? Because he's pulling double duties and it still looked this good. Like, he could have slacked off, but I know that's not him slacking off him not that word does not come into his vocabulary. But he was great in this movie as Mookie. And I mean, I don't think there wasn't a bad actor or actress in this movie.
Oh,
like,
no.
Period. End of story.
Everyone is fantastic. Everyone brings their character to life.
Yeah.
And they I mean, granted, they have an incredible script that they've been given that I think I would love to know how much of this movie is improv or ad lib. Like, especially those three older guys that just sit on the street talking about,
dude,
like,
they were hilarious. Hilarious.
As heavy as this movie does get, there is a lot of comedy in this movie. And there is a lot of, especially with how the film gets later with conflict, there's a lot of really good moments of coming together in this movie too.
Yeah.
Which we'll get into that when we talk a little bit about the meaning and what we kind of walk away from it thinking. But yeah, like those three older guys, man. Like
I couldn't even tell you their names, but I can tell you like they're just sitting there drinking beers and laughing at everybody that goes by and talking about why his name is this and such like that. And it's just like, what are you guys doing? Like,
yeah,
but it's so good.
I had to look up the name because I remember the name of one of them had to do with Dick, and his name is Sweet Dick Willie.
That's what it is. And they're like,
which is one of the best.
Did you get this name?
One of the best character names I've ever heard. Then also Samuel L. Jackson's character named Mr. Senor Love Daddy.
Oh, he was great. And I thought he would be the star of this movie or like be more in it. He is not, but he's placed perfectly in this movie to kind of, he's kind of the narrator, but not at the same time. He's the DJ that everybody I think likes, but he can see everything that happens in that community. So he's basically looking out at these people and be like, hey, I know you, I know you, I know you. And then when certain things happen, he acknowledges those certain things, which kind of rephrases as him being, I don't want to say it like superior, but like he's the one that knows everything and that sees everything in this community.
Yeah, and if you think about it, he's the one that's looking out the window with his radio show. Like, and he has a front row seat to everything. And if anything, he's our narrator, or he is like our guiding force to the kind of what's going on in the movie. A really smart way to do it. Also, the use of music in this movie is
I love the music.
Really smart, especially in like at the end of the film, how it's using more jazzy like music instead of going for a typical score where I feel like it would have been more serious in tone. Is really fascinating, and it's going to take a rewatch or two for me to kind of grasp what that means and what Spike Lee is trying to say with that. But yeah, I mean, it's something. The whole thing is the whole cast really is really great here.
Another thing that I noticed as well was we always go through Mookie to see another person. We never cut to another person, except I think the girlfriend we cut to, just periodically. Like, because when Mookie walks through the streets, it's you focus on Mookie, and then what's the radio guy's name again?
Mr. Senor Love Daddy.
No. Boombox.
Oh,
guys.
Radio Raheem. Sorry.
Radio Raheem comes into view as soon as you're focusing on Mookie as well. That's another genius thing. And then they start a conversation with another camera, which is really cool because you're following Mookie around, but you're being introduced, and then you're getting left off with that character. Because and you never feel lost, and everybody gets their own screen time to make an impression in this movie too, that you're like, oh, I know who that is, because when they all come together, what happens at the end, you're like, okay, this person, they're all there.
Yeah, it really is a great thing that Spike Lee does to help bring it in. But let's go ahead and dig into some of the deeper meanings here. And there's a couple things that I did want to talk about that are less weighty. One of the big things that I noticed, and I want to see if you noticed, was the role that the heat wave has to do in this movie.
I did.
So,
Mm-hmm.
so not only is it like the hottest day on record, or whatever, in New York, that starts getting people upset because they're sweaty and they're hot, and everyone's going to be upset.
No one likes that.
No one. But like one of the things that I also noticed, and I want to see if you noticed, is that it almost like through the entire course of the movie feels like it gets hotter and hotter as the tensions get hotter,
riser and
hotter.
Yeah.
And then obviously the film ends up in a fire.
Mm-hmm.
The pinnacle of heat, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Which I thought was something really fascinating about the movie. But also, and I think that this was just the way that I saw this movie on the first viewing is there really is no right person here.
No. And that's what I got away from that is everybody has their struggles in life and has these I don't know, I'll call them speed bumps in life, and no matter what race, color, ethnicity, anything like that, you are always going to have those. And I like how he didn't side with one of the races in this movie, because you get to see all of them and you're like, wow, well, myself, I'm like, well, that's wrong to do there, that's wrong to do there. And that's when I started picking up, he's not giving a one-sided opinion on something. He's giving everybody to have a chance to speak about it.
Sure. And I think that, different people are going to see this movie in different ways. One thing that I kind of see from some people is I see a lot of people talking about Sal, the owner of the pizzeria shop, as kind of a better person in this, but he's still a racist. That's
what I got.
And if you watch the movie, obviously John Turturro's character, his more vocal son, is the most racist of the three Italian family members. I would say the other brother was probably like the nicest one. Yeah,
he was.
I don't know. He was kind of a cool guy.
He trusted Mookie the entire time.
Yeah, and they went out and did like a pizza delivery thing together. I like that dynamic, but like there's a scene when Sal and his son John Turturro are talking in the restaurant, and John Turturro's talking about how they should leave and go live or go work on their own street with their own people, whatever.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will point to what Sal says and be like, he's not a bad guy. When you think about it, he's like, oh, I've been here since since we first opened. I've seen people grow up, and I've been the food that they have grown up on, right? And on the surface you could see that and go, well, that's noble.
He's a part of the community.
That he's a part of the community, and people and some people do like him. But if you think about it, it's all transactional. If they weren't supportive of his pizzeria, I don't think he would be nearly as friendly about it
or nice. Yeah.
So it does call into question his true feelings, and I think
because I was going to say at the end, what is he going to do? Is he going to rebuild the pizzeria, or is he going to go with his sons to another place to build his pizzeria over there?
Yeah, and what that does bring up at the end is that little bit of positivity where he and Mookie are talking about like the payment thing, and it starts out pretty antagonistic, kind of argumentative, but then by the end of it, it feels like it's on more of a positive note. He doesn't blame Mookie for anything, and there's never like a negative thing. I mean, there are negative things that both of them say, but like it feels more like an up note.
Yeah.
Than I was expecting.
Sounds like he understands why Mookie did it.
Yeah.
And he's angry at what Mookie did, but he understands why he had to do it because of this reason. And I can see him. He's throwing the money at him, and he was getting paid $500 to deliver pizzas. I need
That
to
was for
go over.
2 weeks, I think.
Oh, it was for 2 weeks. Still, that's pretty good.
But
But
like, the what was I gonna say? But like, it doesn't strike. I mean, obviously his son is different, but he doesn't strike me as angry at the. I mean, he's angry at the community because the community is the one that destroys the restaurant.
mm-hmm.
But it feels like there is some guilt and some feeling there that he's responsible for what happened to Radio Raheem.
Yeah, he does.
And I do, and like you said earlier about how the movie doesn't pick sides, it could have shown him and his sons getting all angry about the shop burning or whatever, but it takes a much more interesting approach by showing them just kind of like upset and kind of seeing like what the community has come to. I think there is something deeper there that's going to take some more viewings to watch. But what's really interesting is I was reading a review of this movie from Roger Ebert. And he was talking about the end of this movie, obviously as the tensions keep rising, and how Mookie throws the trash can through the window and basically incites the destruction of the pizzeria. And every film critic or person who saw the movie who was white or not black asked if, he did the right thing. Like, was that really the right thing to do? And then not a single person, this is from Roger Ebert's what he said, not a single person of color asked that question. So there is a difference in perspective, like that was the right thing to do or justified, and it's fascinating because you could look at it both ways. You could, and there's a myriad of ways, and I think that by Spike Lee saying that you need to look at your own prejudices and your own feelings, because none of us are free of racism. It's not a light switch, right?
No,
it's a dimmer switch. You try and keep it as low as you can, or at least good people do. And I'm looking at the camera. Good people try and keep that dimmer switch down. But, it is a dimmer switch. It doesn't turn completely off. It's just because it's so ingrained in our society and in the way that we do things that this movie does confront you with it. Yeah. And it makes you ask what you think. And I think that at the end of the day, I think that the movie title is antithetical to the movie because, the movie title is uttered by DeMayer, which I believe, DeMayer, who says you always got to do the right thing. Always got to do the right thing. And then we see that no one does the right thing.
Yeah.
And I think that it's also partly this movie is an examination. There's definitely an anger there of what happened with police violence at the time. Yeah. And in many ways, the police violence to come. But I also think it is a plea from Spike Lee, and I could be wrong on this. I doubt Spike Lee is watching. If you are, feel free to roast me in the comments. But I feel like this is a plea for everyone to do better. And I think, and I really like that as a meaning, and I think that the title fits that, right?
Well, I like how I think the title would have given it away if it was do the right thing was a question. Like, did he do the right thing would be a different title for this movie. But it's like, well, going into this, I'm like, do the right thing. What do they want me to think about doing the right thing? And watching this movie, I'm like, okay, he kind of didn't do the right thing. He definitely didn't do the right thing. But then when the right happens, in my head, I said he did the right thing. Like, he wanted to be, that was his community. That was a person that he always saw walk up and down the streets and everything like that. And he's pissed. So in my head, I'm like, he did the right thing, even though maybe it's not the correct thing to do, but he did in his head the right thing to do.
And another thing that I just thought of too, while listening to you on that, or one thing that I thought of, right, is I think the character who does their best in this movie to do the right thing is DeMayer. And regardless of his flaws, like asking children to go get beers from him from the store and things like that. He saves the kid from getting hit by the car,
Which
and
no one believes him.
well, then they do.
Yeah,
Then they do believe him.
But at
But
first,
then the mom turns around and is like, "Well, don't tell me how to." It's like sometimes there also could be, and again, I just thought of this. It's gonna have to take some more thinking, but like there could be a thing where like sometimes doing the right thing, is that worth it too?
yeah,
Is it do the right thing morally, or is it do the right thing for you? Who knows? I don't know.
when he gives the flowers to what's her name in the movie? The one that peeks out the window.
The older lady,
the aunt or something. They call her aunt something.
I think it's the one that kind of brings him in the morning.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't remember her name, unfortunately.
He bought the flowers for her, but then she didn't want the flowers. She wanted something else, and that was he thought he was doing the right thing for him and not for her.
Sure.
And you can take that away from anything because of his mistakes, and why people call him the mayor is actually really funny as well, because he feels like the mayor in here, in this movie, and everybody kind of looks up to him or asks him stuff, and he's just that wise old man that lived on the block.
Yeah.
And it's his funny line though, "You don't have Miller High Life?" And it's like, no, I'm not taking this stuff. That was really funny to see or hear. But
I want a mayor in my life, man. I need a man like that. One thing I do want to mention before we close this out, because we've been going for a while, which is not a bad thing, but we've been going for a hot minute here. Get it, hot minute, because it's a movie about a heat wave. There's one conversation in this movie that I think, especially as someone who comes from a white family and a white background and all that, I feel like I've heard this conversation before. And it's when Mookie is talking to Pino, John Turturro's character, about the difference between what he considers people that are the N-word versus like Michael Jordan and Michael Jackson and like people like that. Like what the difference is between those words. I feel like I've heard those conversations, a lot. And that moment really, it hit home, because like that's the kind of, among others, we grew up in a post 9/11 world, so we saw a lot of racism towards Middle Eastern people, and we did things when we were in school that we probably shouldn't have, or said things, right? But like it's that kind of racism that when you're from a family like that looks like us, it feels like it's in good faith sometimes, but it's not. And it's just interesting that like that was one of the most connectable moments, and like it's one of those things where it's like I'm really gonna have to, like one of the steps to take is to be vocal about that when that kind of thing happens. That's one of the steps to being better and to helping out. Any community, not just the Black community, but like the trans community or the LGBTQ community, like anyone who is in danger at any given moment, you got to speak up for them. That's one of the things that we can do as people to be better, and to advocate for positive change.
I totally agree. But the other thing is too, like in my family, I was always told never to even look at that word or say a word that might even bring you backlash or anything like that, because it's just not it's not the right thing to do. And it's so watching this movie was kind of, I don't want to say hard, but it was different for me because I never saw this way in people or anything like that. I never had any bad memories or anything like that with anybody. So because I'm a nice person, I'm not gonna say bad things about anybody or anything like that. But watching this, I'm like, I feel so sorry for people who go through this and have to deal with this all the time.
And I want to make it very clear, that any of my immediate family or friends that watch this, I'm not calling any of you out when I say this. But like, I'm just like the kinds of communities that we grew up around, at least, we had conversations that were similar. I'm not saying the same. No one ever used that kind of like horrible language, but like those kinds of conversations, you'd hear them every once in a while. Like look at Kobe Bryant. He's doing really well compared to most people. Like that kind of just little things that are just horrible in context and horrible in hindsight. Alrighty, Kevin. So this was my pick this week. So I'll go ahead and I'll go first here with this. I think that this movie is very nearly perfect in a lot of ways. On first viewing, I definitely need to watch this again. I'm glad that I own it so that I can watch it again, and it has bonus features, so hopefully I can get a little bit more insight into what is trying to be said here. Spike Lee directs the hell out of this movie. It looks and feels fantastic, like a snapshot of a time in our history, but that also just feels so even more relevant now, unfortunately. And it's something that deserves your attention. I think this is a movie that everyone who watches movies, even people who don't watch movies, should watch at least once. Just to get some different perspective, and hopefully help change things for the better and help to do the right thing. But I gave this movie a 99, 4.5 stars out of 5. I think this movie is fantastic. I think on a second or third viewing, I could give it 100. I wanted to give this 100, but I think there's just so much that I have left to explore personally and within the confines of the film that I want to have that moment where it achieves the 100 status, And I think after a second or third viewing and seeing what Spike Lee's gone for, I think that's when I could give it 100.
Gotcha.
But 99 at first. This movie is very nearly perfect, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Not the score, but everything that you said about it. It is you get dropped into this world, and all the characters that you get to meet, you absolutely adore them, and then when something happens, you absolutely hate whatever happens. But again, like we emphasize, there's no particular side that Spike Lee takes in this about racism or anything like that, and I absolutely love of that part about this movie as well. Is we all have the characters all have their own struggles that they're going through, and they just put it out onto the screen, and you get to interpret it as you want it. And I enjoyed this movie as well. I'm going to give it a 92 out of 100. It probably will go up. Just again, this is a movie that you can watch maybe 4 or 5 times and see little differences in characters and such like that. And it might go up, might go down. You never know.
Well, there you go. But that is pretty much going to be it. So the question now falls to you. What do you think of Do the Right Thing? It's a very loaded question to ask. I do not want to see any very negative comments. I mean, obviously, I want to hear your opinions of the movie. If you like it, don't like it, whatever. But let's try and keep it appropriate. I know for YouTube, there's asking a lot. But make sure you're respectful of one another, because one of you might not take it so well. Next week, we will be covering the crime thriller Heat. So really excited for that one. Make sure to watch it before next week so you're not spoiled. And that'll be it. So thank you so much for watching. Remember our our Real Watchers live stream goes live every single Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So hopefully you'll join us there. And of course, this show goes live every Friday at 4 a.m. And that's it. So until next time, thank you so much everyone for watching, and keep those eyes on the screen.